If it's Friday, with just 25 days until Election Day, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump hit the campaign trail out west as both make efforts to bridge voter gender gaps. Plus, Florida begins recovery efforts yet again after 2 hurricanes in 2 weeks leave a path of destruction and a mounting death toll. And Washington urges de-escalation in the Middle East as Israel launches more deadly strikes on Lebanon, and Iran sends a new warning to Arab nations on letting Israel use their airspace for attacks. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington, 25 days ahead of Election Day at a crucial time for both campaigns. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are both on the campaign trail, talking to voters today and looking ahead to November. It's no secret there will be a massive gender gap at the ballot box, with Harris strongest among women and Trump strongest among men. Check this out. A recent New York Times Siena poll had Trump up 11 points among men and Harris up 16 points among women. That's a 27-point gap, which brings us to a point our friend Chuck Todd brought up in his column last month. We're going to talk to Chuck momentarily. Chuck wrote, quote, "It's obvious at this point that Trump will win men by close to double digits. Ditto with Harris among women. The question is how well each campaign does with its weaker gender." With that in mind, the two campaigns have taken a much different approach to their respective weak spots on gender. The Harris campaign appears to have launched a multi-pronged effort to reach out to men, highlighted by remarks last night in Pittsburgh by former President Barack Obama, specifically targeting black men.
I'm sorry, gentlemen. I've noticed this especially with some men who seem to think Trump's behavior, the bullying and the putting people down, is a sign of strength. And I am here to tell you that is not what real strength is. It never has been. Real strength is about working hard and carrying a heavy load without complaining. Real strength is about taking responsibility for your actions and telling the truth even when it's inconvenient. Real strength is about helping people who need it and standing up for those who can't always stand up for themselves.
Now, the vice president herself will look to further her reach with black men during a Detroit town hall on Tuesday with radio host Charlamagne Tha God. Meanwhile, Harris's running mate Tim Walz is also on the trail today, where he's in part leaning into his credentials, not as a former congressman or governor, but football coach. Later tonight, he'll be attending homecoming at the Minnesota high school where he served as a defensive coordinator. And he sat down for an interview with NFL Hall of Famer Michael Strahan, where he said his coaching experience has prepared him for the presidential ticket.
Well, I think it's about building teams, about bringing diverse folks in, finding where their skills work. I feel like I'm on a championship team with Vice President Harris, but it's that idea of molding, shaping, providing guidance, but understanding that you're just a piece of it. The players got to play. I always said you've got to put them in a position to be successful. And I think where you see these positions, whether it's governor or vice president, got to put the American people in a position to be successful, and they'll do it. They'll do it.
The Democratic appeals to masculinity decidedly different than former President Trump's, whose campaign appears to be all in on appealing to men with interviews on male-friendly podcasts and to focus on toughness in his speeches and downplaying any weaknesses with women. At several campaign stops this week, Donald Trump repeating his message that he knows what women want.
A guy came up to me today. He said, "Sir, you really should be nicer to her. The women won't like it." The women want safety, and the women want to have a country that they can be proud of, I think. They want to see a country that works, and we're going to have a country that works very, very soon. And the women are going to like Trump. I think they like me anyway. I think it's all bullshit, you know? They make it up. They said the women don't like me. I think women love me because they want to be safe. And with me, they're safe. With other people, they're not safe. It's true.
However, in a sign that the campaign may be feeling the heat on the gender gap, we learned today that Trump will hold a Fox News town hall next week in Georgia with an audience entirely composed of women. And with that, let's bring in our NBC News reporters. Gabe Gutierrez is following the Harris campaign. Garrett Hake is in Aurora, Colorado, where the Trump campaign is holding a campaign rally. Gabe, it sure looks like the Harris campaign is basically acknowledging that they have a problem with men, an enthusiasm problem with Black men. Take us inside your conversations with your sources in the campaign. What are they saying about this?
Oh, hi there, Kristen. Well, you touched on some of the issues that they've had over the last couple of weeks and actually over the last couple of days. Former President Obama, speaking yesterday at that rally, was candid, but he was even more candid in the event, a campaign stop that he had right before that rally, where he was speaking to voters, and he acknowledged that there was a lack of enthusiasm, especially among young Black men. And he also suggested that it might be possible the reason some Black voters don't support or may not support Kamala Harris is because they are uncomfortable with the thought of a woman president. So these are very candid conversations, Kristen, and the campaign is leaning into them, especially next week, as you said, plans to hold a town hall type event with Charlemagne the God, who, by the way, a popular radio host who had been extremely critical of President Biden and has been critical of messaging from the Democrats. The campaign trying to reach his listeners. Kristen.
You know, Gabe, it's interesting. Speaking of the strategy from the Harris campaign, we know Tim Walz is doing a lot more media appearances, as is the vice president, as you just noted. Is this effectively an admission that their strategy has not been working?
Well, look, he does have a string of media appearances coming up. He's set to appear on Fox's Sunday show for the second straight week this weekend. And look, the campaign, from the beginning, think about this, Kristen. Tim Walz, a governor of a state, not a whole lot of foreign policy experience, not a whole lot of experience on the national stage, even though he was in Congress. They're kind of trying to let him get warmed up, and now they are bringing him out more because they also realize that he could help them in those critical blue wall states where Tim Walz, he was campaigning in Michigan today. Let's take a listen to some of what he had to say there.
Just yesterday, Donald Trump was in Detroit, and he said, our whole country will end up being Detroit. You're going to have a mess on your hands. But if the guy would have ever spent any time in the Midwest, like all of us know, we'd know Detroit's experiencing American comeback and renaissance. Look, I'm a Twins fan, and you whipped our ass. We know where this is. Detroit's there, so we know. City's growing, crime's down, factories are opening up. But those guys, all they know about manufacturing is manufacturing bull every time they show up.
So yeah, Kristen, the Harris campaign hoping some of that Midwestern charm shows through, and overall they are really ramping up their travel over the next couple of days, both with former President Obama, a powerful surrogate, and also former President Clinton joining the campaigning in places like Georgia and North Carolina, making a push for rural voters next week as well, Kristen.
Yeah, those big names, the closers in the Democratic Party. Garrett, let me turn to you. Let's talk about those gender gap numbers. Former President Trump taking a very Trumpian strategy, basically digging in his heels, suggesting and quite frankly saying out on the trail he's not buying it. He thinks women love him. He thinks they care about issues about the economy, where, of course, polls show he does do better. Is there a strategy here with Trump, or is this just about turning out his base, Garrett?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, Kristen. I mean, his campaign takes a little bit of a more nuanced view here, and they would tell you that, on the economy, for example, women make most of the household spending decisions in households across this country, so that they think their messages on high prices in particular is something that might still appeal to female voters. We've talked about this before, the idea of Trump sort of reaching out to pull in male voters and instead kind of hoping that the Biden campaign, now the Harris campaign, would push female voters into his camp, that they might feel that the policies on the border or crime or public safety in general might allow more female voters to kind of drift away from Harris into his camp. The other part of this is they believe that in this incredibly small world of voters who are still persuadable in this election, that the majority of those out there who haven't made up their mind or who could conceivably convinced to come out to vote are men. And that the universe of people that they are even still talking to in mid-October are men, not women. And so to the degree there is a strategy here and not just playing the cards you're dealt, I think that's where it is for the Trump campaign.
And Garrett, you're there in Aurora, Colorado. What is Trump's message there? What are your key takeaways so far from what you're hearing from the former president?
Yeah, look, I mean, a lot of the crime and safety kind of linked to the border language that we've heard from Donald Trump in so many stops. I would say he's ratcheted it up even another level. He was just talking about the idea of American communities being invaded and conquered by migrants. That's pretty hyperbolic even for him, frankly, on this topic. And that's the way he's describing Aurora, Colorado. Now, look, I interviewed the Aurora police chief before this event started. He said, we've had issues with gangs. We have issues with crimes in this city, 400,000 people, like any other city. But it is not in line with the way Donald Trump describes it. Kristen, I think about the way in which in the last couple of elections, we found ourselves talking about migrant caravans and things of that nature in the final weeks. I see this as a similar kind of tactical choice by Donald Trump to paint a picture of a bleak American scene here when it deals with migrants and crime, and to make sure that that's the kind of thing in the minds of his voters and of persuadable voters as they're making their voting decisions these final weeks.
Yeah, I think you're right with your analysis there. Really quickly, Garrett, Trump is going to Coachella. Talk a little bit about that decision, obviously a deep blue state.
Yeah, not exactly a critical swing area in Southern California, but it is an area with a lot of Latino voters who've been emblematic of the kind of voters who have been shifting in some places by small margins, in some places by larger margins, in Donald Trump's direction. I put Coachella in a similar boat with where we are now in Aurora and some of these arena tours that are going to be in bluer states, where the Trump campaign seems to be banking on the idea that he gets more media, more coverage, more in line with kind of a national narrative by going to these places than he might by doing another event in another town in Pennsylvania, for example. It's a gamble. We're all going to find out how much it pays off in a few weeks, Kristen.
We will for sure, Garrett. It's hard to believe we're less than a month out, just about 3 weeks away now. Garrett, thank you so much. Joining me now for some more insight is NBC News chief political analyst Chuck Todd. Chuck, congratulations on a great Senate debate in Maryland. We are going to get to that. But first, I want to ask you about where we started this broadcast, basically, the gender gap. We talked about your column, which you described the importance for each campaign, basically, of reaching out to their weaker gender. And we saw this on display yesterday with Trump and, frankly, with Obama, who had a very forceful message to black men. What do you make of both of these very different approaches?
Well, look, first of all, the numbers bear this out. In 2016, both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump got the exact same number with their weaker gender, 41%. And that net zero was actually bad for Clinton, right? Well, in 2020, Biden got 45% of men, but Trump got 42% of women. So a gender gap that was advantaged towards a wider gap of women. And what did we see? You saw Joe Biden win by 7 million votes. So this is the importance of just overperforming enough, right? So Trump is hoping to, it's non-college educated white women that he's hoping to convince that, hey, you may not like my abortion position, but what about this, this, and this? That's sort of a conversation with sort of working class women that he wants to have. And then you have this focus on men, particularly men of color, African-American men and Latino men. I will say this, I think it's an interesting decision by the former president to lean in and really sort of chastise. You know, I think it's a risk anytime you chastise a voter saying you're not thinking correctly, rather than being persuadable, right? I think that's a risk. I think I'm not alone here. A lot of people wondering, okay, I know that the former president believes this to his core, that this is a problem. I know that many Democratic strategists have done some focus groups where this shows up, where just a lot of working class men just don't believe a woman can be president. Hard stop. And that's true whether they're white working class or working class of color men. So I'm not saying it's not existed. The question is, talking about it, is that a way to persuade somebody, or does that get people to dig in?
Chuck, I had the same thought, and what's so fascinating, we did hear similar language from Barack Obama in 2012 when he spoke to black voters and said, get off your couch at the CBC
But
dinner.
It was different. That's get out the vote.
Yeah.
I thought, I know what you're talking about, right? When he says, yeah, go get your cousin, you know. But that was get out the vote. That wasn't telling them, you know, you're what you think is wrong, right? That was, I think there's a distinction there. That would be my distinction.
Listen, I think a lot of people heard that language and thought it was a risk. It's a really fascinating point. I do want to turn to your Thursday night. You were moderating the Maryland Senate debate. And, of course, you have Larry Hogan trying to make the case, I'm a moderate. Angela also Brooks saying, don't buy that. He's a Republican. I'm going to play a little bit of a clip from the debate and talk about it on the other side.
Can voters really believe you'll be an independent if the Republicans are paying for your TV advertising?
Well, I think the voters of Maryland know me, and they know my proven track record of standing up to Donald Trump, to Mitch McConnell, and to the Republican Party. I've probably stood up more than anyone in America. I'm not a MAGA, Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell person, as my opponent would let you believe.
Chuck, what did you make of that response, and what were your key takeaways overall?
Well, look, I'm always hesitant when you're, right, you know this feeling, right, when you're involved in it.
Yes,
sometimes you don't get the same impression that somebody gets on TV, right? It can be a lot different. Look, I thought it was, what I took away from it is that they were both speaking to the same voter. You know, they were both trying, you know, because they were very complimentary of each other, right? While they would take shots at each other, in the next breath, they'd say, you know, I believe Governor Hogan would do this, or I really respect Angela also Brooks. You know, they would both go out of their way to say that because they don't want to offend this last voter. I think that the last voter here is somebody who really liked Governor Hogan as governor and doesn't trust Republicans to control the Senate, right? It's this, and this is what also Brooks is trying to exploit, and Hogan is trying to convince them, hey, I'm not going to be a rubber stamp for the Republicans. But I think that they both were trying to talk to that same voter. To get really local here, I think it's a voter in Montgomery County, if you're wondering. But I think that's the voter they're talking to.
Well, Chuck, you did a great job with the debate. Anyone who hasn't seen it yet, pull it up, because you covered a really wide range of topics, including, of course, reproductive rights, even transportation. So I think a lot of people will appreciate the conversation. Chuck Todd, thanks so much.
You got it. Well, candidates accepting the premise of debates and talking issues helps too. And the two of them, look, whatever you think of them, the two of them accept the premise, and it makes for a better debate.
It was. They were both incredibly engaged and willing to answer your questions. So it was a great conversation, Chuck. Thanks so much. Coming up after the break, a look inside the hotly contested Montana Senate campaign as Senator Jon Tester fights to keep his seat and looks to ticket splitters to help him hold on. Plus, we'll have more on Harris and Trump's strategies to tackle the gender gap as their campaigns near their end. The panel joins me to break it all down next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Stay with us. Welcome back. Democrats' chances to retain control of the Senate may be slipping away as red state Democratic incumbents face tough races, including Jon Tester of Montana, who trails his Republican challenger by 8 points in a recent poll. But that number is within the margin of error, and Tester has a game plan to split tickets in Montana and convince Trump supporters to vote for him. This is what he told our own Ryan Nobles in Montana earlier this week.
I don't take any voter for granted. Nobody. I don't care if you're a rock-ribbed Democrat or a Donald Trump Republican or something in between. What we talk about is what's important to this state and not losing this state to the rich out-of-staters who want to make it in their personal playground.
If one of these supporters comes up to you and says, what's something that you and Donald Trump agree on? What would you tell them?
Oh, well, we probably agree on the Second Amendment. We probably agree on the southern border. I mean, there's a number of things.
How do you separate yourself from national Democrats, Kamala Harris in particular?
Look, I've got my own brand here in the state, and it's different than the national Democrats. I would have never been elected the first time or any of the other times if it had been the same as a national Democrat.
And fresh off his cross-state road trip, NBC's Ryan Nobles joins me now, along with the rest of our panel. Melanie Zanona, senior congressional correspondent for Punchbowl News and an NBC News contributor. Simone Sanders Townsend, former senior advisor to Vice President Harris and co-host of The Weekend on MSNBC. And Republican strategist Rick Tyler. He is also an NBC News political analyst. Thanks to all of you for being here. Ryan, Great stuff, great interview. Give us your takeaways from your trip. Obviously, Jon Tester fighting an uphill battle. Is there a sense that he can pull off an unexpected win?
I think it's becoming increasingly difficult for Democrats to hold on to that seat. And I think, you know, the situation that we see playing out in Montana is very similar to the situation we see playing out in the rest of the country. It's a more polarized country, and we're seeing red states become redder and blue states become bluer. And we talked to Steve Daines, who's the NRSC chair while we were there as well, who was also from Montana. And he told me when he first got elected, 7 of the 8 statewide elected officials in Montana were Democrats. That was as late as 2012. Now Jon Tester is the last Democrat standing. And polls show Donald Trump up in that state anywhere from 17 to 20 points. Now, Jon Tester's doing a lot better. There are ticket splitters there. I talked to quite a few of them that were in that Union Hall last night who said they believe that Jon Tester has done personally a lot for them, but they're going to vote for Donald Trump. The question is, can you overcome such a massive margin? The polls right now show it's going to be very difficult.
Part of his strategy is to turn out Native American voters.
That's right. And we went to an Indian reservation along the northern border of Canada, the Blackfeet Reservation. That's a very difficult prospect to get Native Americans to the polls. Many of them don't trust the federal government for obvious reasons. Their polling locations are often difficult to get to, but they've opened up early voting satellite locations in places that there weren't before. We were at an event where these Native American get out the vote folks were giving out coffee and donuts and then saying the voting location's right there. You can go right now and cast your ballot to try and get that vote out. 7% of Montana's population is a Native American population. It's the highest percentage of any state in the union, and an election that could be decided by maybe 10, 20,000 votes. They could make the difference, and Jon Tester has made a point of trying to court that vote.
Absolutely. Melanie, so many close races, but Democrats, not just in Montana, are increasingly feeling like their chances of holding on to the Senate are getting more difficult by the day.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, just look at the Senate map, right? Republicans have an extremely favorable map. I'm not saying it's for sure they're going to win the Senate majority back, but it's theirs to lose, right? If Democrats were to win or keep the Senate, it would be a huge upset for Democrats. And we are at this point in the cycle right now where the leadership in both parties really are going to reevaluate the map and see where do we start to cut our losses and redirect critical resources. That hasn't quite happened yet in Montana, but we are seeing that places like Wisconsin now are looking suddenly very competitive. So they might need to shore up those resources in places like Ohio, Montana, Wisconsin, because they need to hold those seats.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. Simone, let me read you a little bit of what Jonathan Martin wrote. Get your reaction on the other side. This is in Politico, of course. Harris could say that while she hopes Democrats will retain the Senate, she will work with a GOP majority too and find a compromise with them on the looming must-do next year, avoiding an across-the-board tax hike when the Trump tax cuts expire. Of course, this is part of a broader article in which she argues what she would need to do to win. He says that should be part of her argument in these closing weeks.
I don't think so. Look, I know there's lots of people in the middle that folks still need to reach, but like let's not jump the shark and just go ahead and give up the thoughts of a Democratic Senate because you think some people gonna vote for you for that. Look, I do think that the former Democratic strategy to me is like, oh no, there's still a fighting chance, right? It's a very slim, as I used to say when I used to work for Senator Sanders, there's a path. The path may be narrow, but there is a path. I think the path is more wider here for the Senate, but I've always thought it was an uphill battle, and I never thought that Democrats, it was a sure thing that they were going to hold the Senate. The map is difficult, but yet there are so many unknown factors in this race, primarily the record number of voter registrations over the last couple of weeks, and that could make a difference. We don't know who those voters are. We will have to see when voting ends on Election Day. So I don't think that the vice president should be, you know, letting the horses out of the barn just yet when it comes to. But she does need to say that. Look, she'll work with anything, any members of Congress, which I think she has said. Now they're talking about. She's going to talk about unveiling a bipartisan council, right? In addition to putting a Republican in her cabinet. But the reality is that she has to say that in order to get this agenda passed that she has specifically put forward, send her a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House of Representatives.
Rick, what do you make of this? And when you look at the Senate map, do you think it's too soon for I mean, as Simone is saying, it ain't over yet, basically.
It ain't over till it's over.
Exactly.
Weirder things have happened. I think even if the Democrats lost control by the Senate of even one vote, it would be a remarkable performance given the current map, made nearly impossible by the fact Manchin withdrew because that seat is just going to switch, and now Montana, which may be out of reach for the Democrats, which means that the Democrats have to pick it up somewhere else, and everywhere else they're playing offense in a state with a well-known Republican incumbent. So it's going to be tough. The House is in a similar situation, but I'll tell you, look, it speaks to the fact that I think neither party is really trusted with governing, because you have a situation right now where the Senate could switch control and the House could switch control in opposite directions, which tell you that neither party has an overarching governing message to the voter that will get overwhelming support. So we are in for this ride for, I think, quite some time. The answer, of course, is leadership. I don't know who's going to provide that leadership, but somebody has to, because having two parties competing like this, we don't get anything significantly accomplished because one vision or the other won't prevail.
Yeah, it's a great point. Melanie, let me turn to you and just talk about this issue where we started this broadcast, the gender gap. It's an historic, yawning gender gap, and we saw former President Barack Obama, former President Trump effectively try to take their different strategies on the trail. Obama with this very powerful message to black men. Chuck Todd made the point, could be a little risky because he's basically saying, here's how you should be thinking about things. What do you make of the two disparate strategies that we saw?
Yeah, it's really interesting because Kamala Harris is making a very concerted effort to actually fix what they see, Democrats, as a very real problem for them, which is this big gender gap. They haven't made the appeals to men. Trump is making some inroads, at least with some black men, some Hispanic men. And so we've seen multiple things. She is sending Barack Obama out on the campaign trail as a surrogate. He's a very powerful, important voice for that community. She herself, she did Howard Stern this week, which Hillary Clinton never did. She's going to do something with Charlemagne the God next week. They have Tim Walz out pheasant hunting, I think doing an interview with Michael Strahan on the sidelines of a football game, versus look at what Trump's doing. I mean, yes, he is doing a town hall next week, I believe, with women for Fox News, but he's been largely dismissive and defensive of the fact that he even has a women's issue.
Yeah, it's just fantastic. It's just fascinating, I should say, his language around this, the extent to which he's kind of digging in and saying, look, I don't have to be nice to Kamala Harris. It's not going to upset women, and if it does, who cares?
And Kristen, I think it's indicative of how Donald Trump has woken up a whole group of voters that were really not participatory in past election cycles. These lower information, largely non-college educated white men often just sat these elections out. They weren't part of that process. And therefore, Democrats could run up the score with suburban working moms and white women in these suburban districts who were very active and involved in the process. He has closed that gap a little bit through kind of turning out this vote of folks that in the 2012 election and the 2008 election when Barack Obama won just weren't interested in the process. They felt like no one was reaching out to them. That's been Donald Trump's magic bullet. That's what no one saw coming in 2016. He's held on to that constituency, and we see it manifesting itself again in this election.
Dead on. That is so dead on. I'm not sure how to use the modifiers, but I'll accept them. It is dead on. This election is about white men, mostly middle-class labor, and both Donald Trump's trying to overperform with them because, frankly, the Democratic Party lost them. They're trying to get them back. To Kamala Harris's credit, it seems that's all she's talking to. She's got people like former President Barack Obama talking to black men. I think his message has been, your mother raised you. This is like your mother. And I don't know how effective that will be, but I think this election is weirdly enough, is about white men. Who wins this vote?
My eyebrows are so raised, I can't even raise them any higher, Rick. My brows is off the table. No. This election is actually about what kind of country people want to live in and what kind of country they believe that each of the candidates is presenting to them. Because it's not just white men, it's white women as well.
Yeah, but sure.
I do believe that what we are seeing in the polling is very similar to what we saw in 2016, where there were Trump voters that didn't want to say that they were voting for Donald Trump. And people are like, the polling is wrong. No, people lied to the pollsters because they didn't feel comfortable on the phone or in the surveys. They didn't believe them. I think that there are still women, white women have been keeping the Republican Party afloat, to be very clear. That is the question. Black men, maybe he'll see a 2-3% gain in terms of black men. I think maybe a couple more percentage points in terms of Hispanic and Latino men. But if white women do not support Vice President Harris, that will be why Donald Trump wins this election, just like they are why Secretary Clinton lost the election in 2016. So I think we need to be specific about whom we are talking about when we talk about these margins and the numbers.
Very quickly, do you think that Obama's message could backfire to black men?
Look, I talk to a lot of black men. I used to go to the barbershop. Now my barber comes to my house. I will just say that what former President Obama said is actually what people are actually talking. Those are the real conversations that folks are having. I was shocked that he had it where people could record him and and there were cameras that saw it. But I think it's important for him to say. Now, I don't think he speaks for all black men across the country, but Barack Obama is a credible messenger because he himself is a black man, the first black president. Everyone will not, heed his message per se, but it is important that he is saying it, and it gives a permission structure for others to have a conversation more publicly that has been happening quite privately.
Great conversation, you guys. Thank you so much. Ryan Nobles, Melanie Zanona, Simone Sanders Townsend, and Rick Tyler. Really appreciate it on a Friday afternoon. Got everyone fired up. Coming up next, we're on the ground in Florida as the state begins its recovery efforts after Hurricane Milton. Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Today, residents of Southwest Florida are beginning to get a clearer picture of the destruction from Hurricane Milton. Today, crews are working to clear debris and open up more roads and bridges. These recovery efforts are complicated by the fact that cleanup had just started from Hurricane Helene, which hit the region just 2 weeks ago. Officials confirmed 16 deaths related to this Category 3 storm and more than 2 million people still without power. A massive cleanup is underway on the east coast of the state as well after a deadly tornado outbreak tore through communities there. Today, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced temporary sheltering assistance, 60 days guaranteed stay at a hotel for people unable to return home. And joining me now from St. Petersburg, Florida is NBC News correspondent Marissa Parra. And from Port Orange, Florida is NBC News national climate reporter Chase Kane. Thanks to both of you for joining me. Marissa, let me start with you. What's the very latest from St. Petersburg?
Hi, Kristen. I can tell you right now it has been an active scene today. And of course, Milton made landfall 2 days ago on Wednesday night. And we are still seeing water rescues, Kristen. Today, we know that rivers nearby were cresting. And this is once again another instance of people being caught off guard because they're not typically residents that are in those mandatory evacuation zones. Of course, we know my colleague Stephanie has been out there on streets that were not in mandatory evacuation zones. They do not see storm surge. And so there are people, countless others, we're talking about millions others across the state who still do not have power. So this is still a dire situation for so many, almost 2 days after landfall. And of course, as you can see behind me, there is still so much debris that still has to be cleaned up. There is still search and rescue efforts being done in places like those barrier islands on the Gulf Coast here. They still are doing structural assessments before they can let people go back to certain parts of those islands. A lot of questions on what happens next, but most importantly, Kristen, a lot of people just trying to figure out how they're going to make it till tomorrow without power, without running water and basic necessities here, Kristen.
Absolutely, and the devastation behind you is just unbelievable. Chase, let's go to you. You are in Port Orange. What's the very latest there?
The good news for people here in Volusia County is that the water has been steadily receding throughout the day. So that's giving folks a chance to get out and start cleaning up a little bit more. But as the water recedes, we see things like this, like a vehicle which, clearly was not parked like that. But Volusia County, even though we are on the opposite coast, we're on the Atlantic coast, this area got more than 15 inches of rain in some places. And you can see from this truck driving through that, a lot of neighborhoods are still like this, where there is more than a foot of water in the road, Kristen.
And of course, you've been talking to folks there, including about some of the challenges with insurance. What are they telling you?
Yeah, that's a big problem all across Florida and, for lots of states all across the country when they're faced with these repeated extreme weather events, often influenced by climate change. People are struggling to get insurance. And if they can get insurance, it's incredibly expensive. We talked to a lady a little earlier today who said that she's just kind of tired of dealing with this.
We cannot get homeowners insurance, although we have tried. We were denied by Citizen. We either need to drop the legal requirement for them and make them work for us, or our legislature needs to step in.
And I'll also say that I was a little surprised by the number of people that we've heard from today who said, we never dealt with flooding until 2 years ago with Ian, and now their homes are flooding again. And some people are saying, listen, I don't know if I want to go through this. Insurance or not, I may have to move somewhere else, Kristen.
You could hear the frustration in that woman's voice who you were able to interview there. Great interview, Chase. Marissa, let me go back to you. The National Weather Service not predicting rain in the near future, at least. What are officials there on the ground telling you about what that might mean for recovery efforts?
Well, I will say that no news about rain coming again on the way is good news for people here, because they could certainly use a break with rivers that are cresting. Kristen, as we mentioned, active water rescues almost 2 days after Milton's landfall. They certainly could use a break, and I can tell you a lot of people still trying to dry out all of their things, not just their clothes, their basic necessities. But I think that if we have dry conditions, it's only going to help those conditions when it comes to recovery, when it comes to search, and of course, rebuilding here. Kristen?
All right, Marissa Para, Chase Kane, thank you both so much for your great reporting. We really appreciate it. Joining me now is Sandra Tapfumaneyi, Chief of the Sarasota County Emergency Management Team. Thank you so much for joining us. You, of course, joined us earlier this week, a day before Milton hit. How are you holding up? How is the community holding up? And what is the situation on the ground there?
Yeah, well, we appreciate you checking back in with us. So we're definitely still having some impacts from Milton that we are dealing with, but thankfully not the 15 feet of storm surge that we were talking about a few days ago. Definitely a very big wind event, though, still for us. And we did have some storm surge about 8 feet at the southern part of our county, so along the coastline. So it has been, a lot of the response now part is wrapping up, and we're really getting into recovery right now and assessing the needs of our residents.
Sandra, what are the biggest challenges for emergency and rescue workers?
Yeah, I mean, right now we have our county is very large. We have 400,000 people. So for us, it's getting through quickly to really see which areas are hardest impacted. We do have, with the high winds, a number of mobile manufactured homes that were impacted by the winds. And we are, right now we have some points of distribution out, food and water. We have a lot of people that heeded the evacuation, which we are grateful for. And so as they start to come back into the county, we're going to be hearing from them about what exactly they need. But right now we have damage assessment teams out, so we'll get a good count of how many homes were impacted.
Just to follow up on that, I'm hearing you basically say the evacuations went fairly smoothly. For those who stayed, how are they doing? And people are able to start returning to their homes?
Yes, they are able to start returning to their homes. We have one bridge that's damaged, but we're able to still cross it with another bridge. We just did a contraflow to be able to get people across to Lido Key and to Longboat Key. And so, yeah, I mean, they're a bit weary. This is our third hurricane since August. But as they're starting to come back, I think they're very grateful that the damage wasn't worse than they thought it was. And so that's really the general sentiment that we've been getting from our residents. They appreciate all of the information, both that the media, the county, and others have been sharing. And now, they're really going to focus on recovery, cleaning up, and trying to rebuild where we've had damage.
You talk about the fact that you have now dealt with 3 hurricanes. When you think about the fact that we are still in hurricane season and that Milton was intense by historic measures, do you feel as though Sarasota is equipped to deal with more severe weather events?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say that our staff here, we're doing a good job of assessing our county employees that have been impacted, as well as all the partners that are in this room behind me, from municipalities to our hospital system, school district. We have a lot of employees over all of these agencies. So what we've been doing is we've been calling in teams to help us. We have a team here right now from Colorado. The State Emergency Management Agency has sent teams like forestry and the State Guard and Florida National Guard to augment our staffing. So together, we're working together, but we're also being able to give people just a little bit of break here and there so that they can go home, check on their own homes, and take a nap, so that we can be ready. But we are prepared if we need to respond. We have a strong and resilient team here, and I'm confident that we'll be able to respond. I'm hoping that we don't need to, but we'll be ready if another storm comes our way.
I hope you don't either. One more quick question. Obviously, the debris was a big concern because there was still a lot of debris on the ground in the wake of Hurricane Helene. Was that manageable from the perspective of keeping people safe during the storm?
Yeah, we haven't heard a lot of major challenges with the debris. I know we were concerned about that as the storm was approaching. I think, we had the actual eye pass us, which helped and then the storm eroded on the back end. So that actually helped us in a sense. So Siesta Key, for example, it's right where the eye went over. So it was quite calm as it went over that area. So some of the areas weren't quite as bad. And then we have others like in the southern part of the county that did get the bulk of the winds and the storm surge. So, we're just, like I said, still evaluating, and I'm sure we'll hear some stories along the way. But we're going to do everything we can to get the county back up and running as quickly as possible.
Well, you all are in our thoughts as you work to do that. Sandra Tapfumaneyi, thank you so much, Chief of the Sarasota County Emergency Management Team. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Coming up, Israel launches yet another strike into Lebanon, this time into central Beirut, leaving several people dead. We'll have the very latest from Tel Aviv next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Israel appears to be intensifying its attacks against Hezbollah, launching several strikes in central Beirut and southern Lebanon. You can see here that residential building in central Beirut reduced to rubble as rescue workers combed through the destruction. Lebanese health officials say 22 people were killed and more than 100 others were wounded in the attack. Meanwhile, in southern Lebanon, UN peacekeeping forces came under fire, injuring 2 soldiers. It's the second such incident in 2 days and is drawing swift international condemnation. During a phone call with his Israeli counterpart, Defense Secretary Austin emphasized the importance of ensuring the safety of those peacekeeping forces. It's all happening against the backdrop of Israel's potential retaliatory actions against Iran. 2 diplomats from Gulf nations tell NBC News that behind the scenes, Iran has been urging its Arab neighbors not to allow Israel to use their airspace for any kind of retaliation, warning that countries who help Israel could potentially become part of the war. Joining me now is Aaron McLaughlin in Tel Aviv. Aaron, thanks so much for joining us. So how is Israel responding to those accusations that it's targeting UN peacekeepers in Lebanon?
Well, in terms of the incident that happened today, Kristen, the Israeli military is claiming that at the time that it opened fire on a UNIFIL post, that it was responding to an immediate threat. They're also saying that they warned the peacekeeping troops there hours before that happened, warning them to get to a safe space. Now, the UN spokesperson saying that no specific warning was given to those troops when it happened. As you note, it's the second incident in as many days. 2 soldiers, 2 peacekeeping soldiers wounded today. They were taken to 2 separate hospitals, one suffering from shrapnel wounds. And it comes in the same week that, according to the same UN spokesperson, the Israeli military had warned peacekeeping forces along the border to pull back from the border. Countries, including Ireland, declining to do that, saying that there is an importance there to have that international peacekeeping force along the border, that it's necessary, and that it's not Israel's right to demand or request that those peacekeeping forces move back from the border. Kristen.
And Aaron, as we reported, Iran is basically warning Arab countries not to allow Israel to use their airspace for a retaliatory strike. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, and a diplomat telling NBC News that it's unlikely that those Arab countries would allow Israel to use that airspace. Still, though, speaking to analysts familiar with the region, they say that if there is going to be an air attack, and again, that's a big if, we do not know the nature of this retaliatory strike. Israeli officials saying that it will be a surprise. But if that happens, it is possible that Israel could then just defy the objections of, say, Syria and Iraq and fly over those countries instead of the Arab states. Also noting that there have been strikes against radar systems inside Syria in the last week. Kristen.
And of course, people are preparing to gather for Yom Kippur. What is the mood right now as this conflict appears to be expanding, Aaron?
Now, Kristen, well, Yom Kippur is a moment for reflection, fasting, and prayer today here in Tel Aviv. That tranquility was broken late in the evening. According to the Israeli military, 2 drones flew into Israeli airspace. One of the drones was shot down. The other managed to slam into a nursing home north of Tel Aviv. I could hear from this position the explosions in the distance. Sirens also sounded north of Tel Aviv, sending people to shelters. It's just an example of how this war has become part of everyday life, not just here, of course, in Israel, but in Gaza, where hundreds of thousands are now displaced once again in northern Gaza, and then more than 1 million displaced in Lebanon. People in Gaza saying, Palestinians that we're speaking to there, saying the bombardment in the last week has been so intense there. They feel as though it's the early days of the war. Kristen.
There's devastation everywhere there. Aaron, please continue to stay safe. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. After the break, as many as 87% of House races may have already been decided headed into the general election. We'll speak with the leader of a group trying to change that next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Election Day may be just 25 days from now, but the vast majority of House races may have already been decided. In fact, 87% of House elections were determined in primaries, according to the Unite America Institute. And according to the group, just 7% of Americans determined those elections. UAI says the solution, open primaries, which it claims will lead to less partisanship and less political gridlock. 5 states have already enacted open primaries, and the issue will be on the ballot next month in 6 additional states. I'm joined now by the executive director of Unite America Institute, Nick Troiano. Thank you, Nick, for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Great to be with you, Kristen.
So break this down for me. What is your biggest concern here, and how would open primaries actually fix the problem?
Well, our biggest concern is that most ballots in the general election don't matter today because most elections are decided in low turnout party primaries. This is the primary problem in our politics, disenfranchising voters and fueling division in Congress. The good news is to fix it, we don't need to pass a constitutional amendment, don't need to have an act of Congress. Every state can change these laws, as 6 states are aiming to do on the ballot this year. So instead of having to choose between a red ballot or a blue ballot, you get a red, white, and blue ballot. All the candidates are on it. You choose your favorite. The top finishers go to the general election, and whoever wins majority support gets elected.
What do you say to the argument that open primaries would actually exacerbate partisanship in these districts?
I don't think there's evidence for that. I think the biggest fueling of polarization and partisanship we're seeing right now is because most members of Congress fear being primaried by someone to their ideological extreme if they dare work across the aisle to solve a problem. So when we open primaries and let all voters participate, it incentivizes our leaders to have to actually work together to represent a true majority of voters, not just pander to the base of their own party.
What is your assessment of how having more open primaries might impact presidential and even Senate races? Would there be an impact?
Well, certainly it would impact races for the Senate, the U.S. House, and state legislature where these are on the ballot. And every state that passes open primaries means that we liberate both U.S. senators, several U.S. representatives to represent their constituents. And again, not just the party insiders or party bosses, so that we can actually address the major growing challenges facing the country. You can see there are issues where 60, 70, 80% of Americans agree. The tragedy is not that we're hopelessly divided, it's that our leaders are, even when we can find common ground. Changing our electoral system will change those incentives and hopefully produce much better results.
Nick, why do you think more states haven't adopted open primaries yet?
Well, the question is, why are so many states pursuing it right now? And I think that's because we see growing dysfunction in politics. A majority of Americans now identify as political independents and want more freedom to choose the person, not the party. And we've seen promising results from states that have already enacted these reforms, like in Alaska in 2022, where it showed it didn't benefit either party. It simply gave a lot more power to voters.
So walk me through your strategy. How do you plan to, in addition to appearing on shows like this, convince these states that they should adopt open primaries?
Well, half the states, we have to convince the state legislators to change the rules, and we're working on that in states like Pennsylvania, where there's a bipartisan bill to do this right now in the state legislature. And in the other half of states, we can go directly to the ballot. 1.5 million people have signed petitions to get these initiatives on the ballot in November, and the people will decide. Of course, Congress can do so as well. There is a bipartisan bill called the Let America Vote Act. Brian Fitzpatrick is one of the lead sponsors in the House. We're hoping to see that get passed in Congress in the next few years as well.
All right, Nick Troiano, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us this hour. We'll be back Monday with more Meet the Press Now. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press on your local NBC News station. I'll be joined by Speaker of the House Mike Johnson and former Republican Representative Liz Cheney. You do not want to miss it. Plus, of course, we have new polling coming up. NBC News Now coverage continues with Yasmin Vesuvian in for Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.